They say every wedding has its unforgettable moment, the one thing guests will whisper about for years. But I promise you, no one at Daniel and Emily's wedding could have predicted this one. I was standing just 6 feet away when it happened, close enough to see the tiny tremor in Emily's champagne glass, and the way the fairy lights above flickered like they too sensed the tension about to explode. And if you believe that no one, no matter how wealthy or powerful, has the right to humiliate someone on what should be the happiest day of their life, then make sure to like this video and subscribe, because what I'm about to tell you is a story about public disgrace, private truth, and a bride who refused to stay silent. The whole day had begun like something out of a romantic film. The venue was a sprawling vineyard estate perched on the edge of the coast, the kind of place where the sea breeze carries the faint scent of roses and salt, and where every photo looks like it belongs in a bridal magazine. Emily, the bride, was a vision, lace cascading down her back, her hair twisted into an intricate bun dotted with pearls, and a smile so radiant it felt like it could warm the coldest heart. Daniel stood beside her in a tailored navy suit, his hand never straying far from hers, his gaze the soft kind you only see when a man is completely certain of the woman beside him. Guests floated between champagne toasts and hors d'oeuvres, laughter spilling across the courtyard like sunlight. I remember thinking how perfectly everything was unfolding, until Aunt Patricia arrived. Now, Aunt Patricia wasn't on the schedule. She hadn't even RSVP'd, though everyone knew she'd never miss the chance to make an appearance at a family gathering, especially one that could put her at the center of attention. She was Daniel's late mother's older sister, and in the Mercer family, her name was uttered with the same cautious reverence people use when discussing unpredictable weather, beautiful on the surface, but capable of ruining everything without warning. She swept in wearing a wine-red dress that seemed to dare anyone to challenge her presence, her silver hair coiled into a perfect chignon, her diamond earrings catching the candlelight like twin sparks. At first, she mingled like everyone else, exchanging air kisses and dispensing her trademark backhanded compliments. "Oh, you look stunning, dear. Have you been getting enough rest?" But then came the speeches. Daniel's best man had just finished a heartfelt toast that left the couple laughing and wiping tears from their eyes when Aunt Patricia rose from her table near the front. No microphone, no smile, just that sharp, predatory look I'd seen her use before when she was about to slice someone down to size with nothing more than her voice. She walked straight up to Emily, every stiletto step clicking against the marble floor in a rhythm that made people turn their heads. There was a murmur among the guests, confusion laced with curiosity. And then, without a word of warning, Patricia raised her hand and struck Emily across the face. The sound of the slap cracked through the air louder than any champagne cork. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Someone dropped a glass, and it shattered in the background like punctuation to the chaos. Emily's head jerked slightly from the force, but she didn't stumble. Instead, she just stood there, one hand instinctively brushing the spot on her cheek, her eyes wide but dry. For a moment, even Daniel seemed frozen, his arm halfway extended toward his bride, but not yet reaching her. "You," Patricia hissed, her voice cutting through the stunned silence, "are nothing but a gold-digging little actress, and I won't stand here and watch you tear this family apart." Her words seemed to echo off the stone walls of the courtyard, each one sharper than the last. I could see guests shifting in their seats, some leaning forward, others shrinking back, torn between the human instinct to watch a train wreck and the discomfort of being unwilling witnesses to such public cruelty. The string quartet in the corners stopped mid-song. The violinist's bow hovered above the strings, frozen. I searched Daniel's face for a reaction, for some sign of outrage or defense of his new wife, but what I saw instead was a strange blend of shock and calculation, like a man rapidly trying to solve an equation he never expected to face. Emily, to her credit, didn't crumble. She didn't shout back or dissolve into tears. She simply lowered her champagne flute to the nearest table, straightened her shoulders, and locked eyes with Patricia in a way that made me think. No, made me know that this was far from over. The air around us felt charged, every guest holding their breath. Patricia smirked as though she'd won some unspoken battle, then turned on her heel and began to walk away, her chin lifted in satisfaction. Emily's gaze followed her, unblinking, But instead of calling after her or appealing to the crowd for sympathy, Emily did something that made my skin prickle. She quietly stepped down from the dais, weaving her way between tables until she reached the far edge of the courtyard. There, partially obscured by a cascade of white roses, was a narrow side path leading toward the estate's main house. She slipped into the shadows without a word, her gown trailing like a whisper behind her. I couldn't help but notice she had her phone in her hand, her thumb already scrolling or dialing as she disappeared from sight. Guests began to murmur louder now, theories buzzing from table to table. Was it about money? An old grudge? Some scandal no one outside the family knew about? I heard someone speculate that Emily had been seeing someone else. Another insisted that Patricia was just bitter because she'd never liked any of Daniel's girlfriends. But I knew enough about Emily to suspect there was more, something deliberate, in the way she'd walked off, something about the steady precision in her movements. Daniel eventually excused himself to check on Emily, though he was intercepted halfway by two uncles demanding to know what Patricia's problem was. Meanwhile, Patricia herself was holding court at her table, accepting murmured support from a few loyalists, but ignoring the glares from everyone else. I stayed where I was, my eyes on the path Emily had taken, and when she finally returned, nearly 40 minutes later, she wasn't alone. At her side was a tall, sharply dressed man in a dark suit, the kind that looked tailored to within an inch of its life, his expression cool and unreadable. Emily's makeup was still flawless, her hair still immaculate, but there was a new weight in her posture, a quiet authority that hadn't been there before. She walked straight toward the center of the courtyard, toward the microphone at the DJ stand, her companion a step behind her. The guests fell silent again, sensing that whatever came next might change the tone of the night entirely. And they were right, though none of them, not even me, could have guessed how far Emily was about to go. You could have heard a pin drop as Emily stepped to the microphone, her hand resting lightly on the stand, eyes sweeping across the crowd like a queen surveying her court. Beside her stood a tall, impeccably composed man, just far enough back to let her command the spotlight, yet close enough that his presence was clearly deliberate. "Thank you all for being here today," Emily began, her voice even, almost warm, but with an undertone that made my pulse quicken. "When I walked down that aisle earlier, I thought this would be the happiest day of my life. But sometimes, the truth refuses to wait for a convenient moment." Her gaze locked on Aunt Patricia, who sat rigid at her table, fingers clenching her wine glass so tightly I half expected it to shatter. "You've just heard a serious accusation against me," Emily went on, "one I will not let stand. And since Patricia chose to make this a public spectacle, I'll answer it publicly." The man stepped forward, producing a sleek black folder that all but whispered of lawyers and sealed courtrooms. Emily took it, nodded to the DJ, and the fairy lights dimmed. The projection screen, meant for childhood photo slides, flickered to life, not with baby pictures, but with scanned bank statements, notarized affidavits, and email threads dense with numbers and signatures. Murmurs rippled through the guests like a shiver. "What you see here," Emily said, voice steady but sharp, "is proof of a long-running embezzlement scheme. Funds siphoned from the Mercer family estate over the past 12 years. Money meant for Daniel and his siblings after his parents passed." The documents scrolled, highlighting transfers to offshore accounts, each bearing Patricia's name. Gasps broke out. Patricia's face drained of color, but she stayed seated, chin tilted defiantly. Emily pressed on. "For months, I've worked with a private investigator to find out why Daniel's inheritance was lighter than it should be. I plan to tell him privately. But when someone slaps you in front of your wedding guests and calls you a fraud, they forfeit the courtesy of silence." Emily introduced the man as Marcus Shaw, a licensed investigator. He confirmed the evidence had already been given to authorities and that an arrest warrant was in the works. The crowd split, half glaring at Patricia, the other half staring at Emily in awe. Patricia shoved her chair back with a loud scrape and stood. "This is a setup," she snapped. "She's twisting this. Belonged to Daniel." Emily cut in, her voice rising. "And you stole it. You didn't think anyone would dig deep enough to find it. You underestimated me, Patricia." Two uniformed security guards emerged from the shadows, stepping toward her. One murmured something low. Patricia's eyes darted toward Daniel, but he stayed seated, hands folded, face unreadable. Her jaw trembled as the guards gestured to the door. "This isn't over," she spat, though it was unclear if it was a threat or warning. Guests parted in silence as she was escorted out, her heels striking the marble like gunshots. When the doors shut, quiet settled over the courtyard. Emily turned to Daniel, her voice softening for the first time. "I'm sorry it had to happen like this," she said. "But I wasn't going to let your family's name be smeared. Not by lies about me, and not by the truth about her staying hidden." From the folder, she withdrew a sealed envelope and placed it in his hands. "Inside is proof the remainder of the estate has been secured in your name and your siblings. Every penny she didn't touch is safe now." Daniel's eyes lingered on hers, a mix of gratitude, shock, and something more fragile. Then he stood, pulling her into an embrace that broke the tension like sunlight through clouds. Applause erupted, not polite, but wholehearted. Emily, still holding the mic, smiled at the crowd. "Now," she said, "let's get back to celebrating love, eating too much cake, and maybe dancing like no one's watching. And in this family, no one ruins a wedding. Except maybe the flower girl when she's had too much sugar." Laughter rolled through the courtyard as the DJ struck up a lively song. Guests drifted back to the dance floor, though whispers still hummed. Marcus shook Daniel's hand and disappeared into the crowd. And Emily, she was radiant again, not because her gown was perfect, but because she'd taken the worst moment of her life and made it unshakably hers. This wedding would be remembered not for the slap, but for the bride who answered it with truth, spoken plainly, leaving nothing to hide. The night settled into a rhythm again, though you could still feel the undercurrent of what had just unfolded, like the lingering scent of rain after a storm. Emily and Daniel's first dance flowed into an impromptu circle of friends and family joining them, the music carrying a renewed sense of joy rather than the forced cheer that often follows a scandal. I noticed Daniel glance toward Emily more than once, as though seeing her for the first time in a way that went beyond the lace and the vows. This wasn't just his bride. This was the woman who had just defended his name, his legacy, and his family's future with a level of grace most people could only wish for. Later, when the cake was cut and champagne glasses clinked again, I caught sight of Marcus in a quiet corner, phone pressed to his ear, likely ensuring that Patricia's exit would be more than just temporary, that the legal side of this story was already in motion. Emily, meanwhile, moved through the crowd effortlessly, thanking guests, posing for photos, laughing in a way that was lighter now, freer. There was no triumphal smirk, no pity satisfaction, just the calm of someone who had acted with purpose and knew she'd done the right thing. As the evening wound down, Daniel took the microphone briefly, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been told weddings are about beginnings," he said. "Tonight, we began something stronger than I ever imagined. Not just a marriage, but a partnership that stands up to anything, together." Emily's hand found his, their fingers interlacing naturally, like they'd always known the other belonged there. And in that moment, I understood. What Patricia had meant as a blow had only forged something unbreakable. The gossip would fade, the headlines would pass, but the image that would remain, etched into the memory of every witness, was of a bride who refused to be defined by anyone else's lies and left her own mark on the night. A mark that was, indeed, unforgettable.